Hello class, here we are with Chapter 3, Purchasing Policy and Procedures. The term policy is a guide. It's something that sort of helps us with the way we do things. It brings everybody together on the same page so that we're not improvising and so that we're doing something consistently. Policies usually start out as informal policies. Somebody that came from another company or different departments are doing things differently, and at some point somebody figures, hey, we need to write this down, we need to be consistent, and so it becomes formal. And that's what we're referring today are formal policies, and they're a reflection of the organizational culture, the way we do business here. There are pros and cons of using policies. For one, the pros, that is that top management gets to define what it is that they want for the organization. And it provides a framework for doing the same thing all over the place. That what's good at one part of the organization is good in another part. That's what a policy does, is that it brings us all together, and it standardizes what we do. It standardizes our culture too. Now, one of the problems is you have a large organization, you're going to have problems. Now, it depends. I mean, you have a Coca-Cola that's in more countries than there are in the United Nations. Their big policy might be overall is sell Coke. Being facetious, but sometimes going across so many countries and cultures, that's maybe the way that you just can't have one size fits all. But you go to a USAA that has a military culture behind it. A lot of these people are ex-military, and they're so used to policies, even though they're a big organization, they like having policy manuals for probably everything. Anyway, the one we're talking about today is a policy manual for purchasing. One of the problems also, or cons, that is that, effective management. Don't we hire smart managers at our company that can figure things out? Should we spell everything out for everybody? Maybe we should leave some room. Which leads us to the last bullet on the cons, is that what if there is an innovative way of doing something, or we need some flexibility, that the answer is a little bit heavy-handed in one direction and we need it to go in another direction on this one thing. Well, let's empower our people and not write our policies so comprehensively that they have no flexibility to innovate or to meet a challenge. Now you have a little picture of Goldilocks right side of your screen, and Goldilocks, she likes, and Goldilocks is a nice philosophy, not too hard, not too soft, not too big, not too small. It's just right. Well, that's the kind of criteria we're looking for. We're looking for criteria that are, one, action-oriented. Is that, what is this policy going to do? We don't want it to just sit around and gather dust, because all it is philosophizing or doing something that we're not really thinking about. It should be relevant. It should be about what we are doing. It should be concise. Is that if you can measure it, you don't want a 2 or 3 inch policy manual. Conciseness is about being short, to the point. Just get it out, and don't be ambiguous. Don't use vague terms. Don't use things that haven't been defined. Don't write something that says one thing, in one part of the manual, another place it says something else. Don't do that. It should be timely and current. It should be about maybe every year or every 2 years you go in there and you're changing things. And the other times that you usually change something in your policy manual is after a lawsuit. I know this is not what we talk about in class, but companies get hit with lawsuits, and it's after one of those lawsuits that you say, hey, we need to go and change the policy on this. And that's going to happen. And the important overall thing for an effective policy is that it guides problem solving. It guides our behaviors, the way we do stuff. Now, if you got a chance to write a policy from scratch, or you are amending the current policy manual at your organization, here are some very good sections or areas. The first one is take a look at who has the authority, responsibility to make what purchases, with whom, and what are the objectives for the purchasing department and org charts and that kind of stuff. It's setting the tone for everything, setting boundaries and so on. The second bullet that you're going to get into, and right up front, is talk about ethics. The ethics of the purchasing department. We don't engage in kickbacks, irregular dealings. If it smells a little bit, we don't want it to smell. We're going to clean things up. That's the way you run purchasing, so there are no questions. The third one, bullet area, talks about what are our social and minority business objectives? How are we going to help minority business people? How are we going to help the environment? How are we going to buy the right chemicals for use in cleaning in our company that are not going to hurt people, or safe equipment, that kind of stuff. Finally, you get into the fourth bullet, and there you're actually reaching out now to your suppliers and about how you pick suppliers, that's qualifications for a supplier, you develop your suppliers, how you purchase from suppliers, maybe trust and relational things, and there's some philosophy. Yes, there is. That word trust brings that up, but of course it's going to be to the point, and of course objectives of why we trust and how are we going to measure it and so on. Finally, the last one is operational issues, and this is where we're starting to move away a little bit from policies, and we're moving now towards actually procedures. How do we negotiate? How do we manage our contracts, and so on? Which leads us to this to this slide, the procedure manual. It's a reference guide, and it's really good for the new employees who don't know how to do much of anything in purchasing. They're that new, or maybe they're coming from another organization and they don't know how we do it in our organization. And just like with the policy, a procedure should provide consistency about how you do, or documenting the steps for a given activity. We do this first, then we go that, and so on. And you may have diagrams and flow charts or lists of the steps, some kind of algorithm. And I know it says may specify industry best practices. It shouldn't say may, it should be will use industry best practices, and our book is full of them. Also, there's going to be articles that you're going to read, like you're doing in this class, where you learn about best practices. And of course, just like with the policy manual, your procedure manual should be reviewed periodically. Oh, by the way, the policy and procedure may be one and the same, and maybe it's in two sections, maybe there is no division. I'm treating them here as if they're two, but you can put them together. Now, the procedural areas, you're going to talk about the purchasing cycle, and that is what Chapter 2 was all about. And in your organization, how do you do the purchasing cycle? Has it been changing? Have you gone electronic now? Maybe you're already electronic. What are the different forms? That's the second bullet there. And developing forms, the form should reflect what's in the purchasing, in the policy manual. And finally, the third bullet, now that's one place where you may be going back and forth with the legal department for special contracts. Of course, for contracts that are used over and over, boilerplate of kinds of contracts, you'll just be changing names and dates and some other things in it. But you should get well acquainted with those. And finally, operational procedures. How do you do things within the purchasing department? Here I have just one slide about purchasing forms, and we talk about what's the proper way of using them, what is the meaning of each informational field. We'll have a very good definition of each one, how to handle and store POs, and I think that this book was written or still the mentality might be of paper, with handling and storage. But really, with electronics or with computers, that changes a whole lot. And finally, the approval process, and that's also coming from the policy manual, it translates over into procedure as who has the right to approve what, for how much, and so on and so forth. Anyway, in a nutshell, this is chapter 3. I hope that you've had a chance to read it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a very good chapter.